July 16, 1969. Apollo 11's Saturn V rocket, longer than a football field, breaks free of the launch pad. Its destination, the moon. The Apollo program launched the imaginations of America's greatest minds, spurred by the boldest dare in human history.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The Eagle has landed. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down.
A moonshot for all of humanity.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That first walk on the moon was over 40 years ago. In this hour, we'll explore 5 great moonshots of today. Sending astronauts to Mars, 3D printing a human heart, creating a star on Earth, flying from New York to London in an hour, and mapping the human brain. Welcome to a GPS special, Moonshots for the 21st Century. It was early December 2014 at Cape Canaveral.
Beautiful morning for a launch in Florida.
But it felt a little bit like the days of Apollo.
Fox 2.
Go.
BP.
Go.
Annie.
Go.
Status check.
Go Delta.
At the top of a Delta IV heavy rocket sat Orion, the spacecraft NASA has designed for sending human beings to Mars.
3, 2, 1. And liftoff at dawn. The dawn of Orion and a new era of American space exploration.
It went farther into space than any other NASA craft meant for humans in over 40 years, 14 times higher than the International Space Station.
We are now just a few miles away from reaching peak altitude.
Then it returned at speeds of up to 20,000 miles per hour, withstanding 4,000-degree heat, before splashing down in the Pacific Ocean.
Orion's maiden flight from start to finish was picture perfect.
The trip lasted only 4.5 hours, but NASA hopes that future versions of Orion will take the much longer journey with astronauts all the way to Mars.
When the American people get behind something and the international community gets behind it, we can do anything we want to do.
Charles Bolden has served at NASA for nearly 2 decades, leading the agency since 2009.
Usually launches are emotional, but it was an incredible day. I think anybody who knows what's going on and who doesn't tear up probably is just, they're pretty hard.
Why send a manned mission to Mars? This is going to be expensive, it's going to be challenging. Why do it?
Well, we have to. You have to send a human somewhere if you really want to find difficult answers. Is there life somewhere else in our universe? Is there the real possibility that humans can exist somewhere away from Earth? That's really, really important. I happen to be one who believes that a multi-planet species can survive in perpetuity. Single planet species will die away.
NASA says it will send humans to Mars in the 2030s. They're making more progress toward that goal than you might realize.
8, 7, 6.
To cheat Earth's gravity with a crew of astronauts and the things they'll need for Mars, NASA needs a new ride.
Liftoff.
So it's building a new generation of rockets, some of the largest, most powerful rockets it has ever built, measuring taller than the Statue of Liberty. A massive welding tool will piece together the cylinders and domes that will make up the rocket's fuel tanks. And to save a few bucks, NASA will use engines from the old space shuttle fleet, which still have plenty of power. After leaving Earth, the astronauts will face at least 34 million miles of space travel. A months-long journey, NASA says. The whole mission could last 3 years. Human beings can go crazy in that kind of cramped, long-term isolation. So to see how a crew can cope, NASA is funding isolation studies, like the High Seas mission.
See ya!
Bye! 5 people spent 4 months in a small dome on the Mars-like Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii.
This is the main living space right here.
There was a 20-minute communication delay with the outside world, similar to what Mars astronauts would face.
This is the only window that we have in the habitat.
The only time they were allowed to leave the habitat was in spacesuits.
Okay, Casey has climbed the mountain.
We haven't had a huge amount of interpersonal conflict, although every once in a while... straighten up so that you're not always facing away from the camera.
To keep track of the group's mood,
it's called a sociometric badge.
Crew members wore devices that detected the volume of their voices and their proximity to one another. And their writing was analyzed by a computer program that looked for telling words and phrases.
Words that tend to have stronger emotional content, obviously keywords like frustrated and jerk and stuff like that could be signs, but there's also subtler signs as well.
The day the mission ended was a happy one for the crew.
Oh my God!
They told us things went well.
There are going to be ups and downs.
What I found really difficult is...
But admitted, there were some testy moments.
60 days in, you're going, why am I reacting this way? I never would react this way. This isn't who I am.
The final leg of the journey might be the most difficult part of all, the landing.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.
NASA hopes to learn from the landings of Mars rovers like Curiosity.
And I can remember after landing sort of being bewildered. It's like a decade of my life is done. It worked.
Adam Stelzner is the rock star rocket scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory,
communicate to Earth, and
whose team made the landing happen.
Mars has an annoying atmosphere. It's very thin. It's sort of equivalent to the atmosphere on Earth at about 120 to 150,000 feet.
That was too thin to slow down Curiosity enough with parachutes. So Stelzner and his team thought up the Sky Crane, a rocket-powered craft that would lower the rover to the surface with cables, then speed off and crash land a safe distance away.
We knew that every time we spoke of it, we'd lose our credibility because it looked so crazy.
The crazy plan worked, but landing humans on the red planet will be a lot harder than landing a rover.
Curiosity was about 2 metric tons, as she approached the surface of Mars. And we think that a human vessel would be something like 20 or 40 metric tons as it approached the surface of Mars.
What's the single hardest thing about getting to Mars?
Convincing people that it's worth it is the single most difficult thing. Convincing the American taxpayer, the administration, the Congress, that it's really worth this and that there is a benefit to be gained is probably the single much more difficult than the technological challenges out there.
Do you wish, though, that there was a much more ambitious funding pattern for...
Now, see, you're going to get me in trouble. Yes, I'm the NASA administrator. I always wish for much, much more. This is really hard, and this is very risky, and we are going to lose things and people along the way, but it's so worth it, because what we're going to do for humanity by making us a multi-planet species are just beyond the imagination. It's mind-boggling the way that this is going to be an advantage to humanity. We can't even imagine that.
Coming up, 3D printers can make some amazing things these days. But what about printing human organs? One man says that 10 years from now, he will be able to print an entire human heart.
Perfect. All right, you can sit back. I'm just gonna put your bracelet on.
Last year, 5-year-old Ella Cruz needed a new heart.
First, I'm gonna take some pictures in your belly, okay? And then we'll take some up here, okay?
She was born with a serious heart defect. 3 open heart surgeries weren't enough to fix it.
Breathe.
Only the right-sized heart with the right blood type would do. And even though she was in the top priority category for a transplant, she had been waiting for months.
This is one thing that tests every single emotion that you have in your body. Fear, anxiety, every day.
Hey, Ella. How are you?
Thousands of Americans are on the national waiting list for a new heart, according to the US government. And even if they get one, their bodies may reject it. But what if doctors could manufacture a heart with the patient's own cells using a 3D printer? That new machine that makes everything from food to shoes to cars. If that sounds like a pipe dream, say hello to the BioAssembly Bot. It's a robot that can already print several parts of the heart.
I can tell the robot printer, build this for us. This is what we're going to print for you.
Blood vessels, heart valves, and the heart's walls. It can print these parts with living human cells. And one of its masterminds believes it can print an entire heart within a moonshot time frame.
I really think that if we put a large team together, which we are, I think we can get there within 10 years.
Dr. Stuart Williams at the University of Louisville leads the team that's working toward this goal.
Verify and keep eyes on pressures.
And for Williams, the goal is personal.
My dad died of heart disease, and the devices, the instruments that would really have been necessary to keep his heart functioning were not available at that time. So it really grew out of a personal vendetta that I had against cardiovascular pathology.
Now, he and his colleagues are pioneers in the field of bioprinting.
We're taking biology and making it IT.
Having built a 6-axis robot that they say would create a heart right in the operating room.
What would this look like visually? I'm still trying to understand. You'd press a button and this thing would actually print a heart. Is that what would happen?
Precisely. That is the plan.
MRI images of a healthy heart
Hold your breath.
would be converted into a digital 3D model. Then the patient's own fat would be taken out and converted into the different cells that make up the heart.
We now have these incredible capabilities to take an adult cell and transform it into other types of cells.
Parts of the heart would then be bioprinted, piece by piece, and soon you would have a new heart.
How long would it take to print a heart?
The printing of the heart, I believe, could be accomplished in essentially a single day.
Dr. Williams and his team aren't the only bioprinters on the block. A group at Cornell University has bioprinted a human ear.
Cold collagen gel being deposited onto the warm plate. What that enables you to get is really sharp edges and really sharp boundaries.
It takes Dr. Larry Bonasser and his team
that looks great.
Just 15 minutes to print one.
They're pretty robust. You know, I can pick them up and they can bend and they can do all the things that normal cartilage should do.
3D printed ears and other body parts, Bonasser estimates,
this is a meniscus,
could be used in human trials in less than 5 years.
That brings the ability to make thousands, millions of tissues and to customize them for individual people.
Do you sometimes worry that you're playing God, that you're actually creating human beings, parts of human beings?
Well, I don't worry about that, but I certainly hope that this technology can benefit as many people as possible.
All right, Miss Ella, I think you're doing great.
People like Ella Cruz and the millions of others born with heart defects and suffering from heart disease. Recently, Ella got a new heart. and her long wait is now over. She's been adjusting to it well. If Dr. Williams' moonshot becomes a reality, other children may not need to wait for a heart ever again. Coming up, scientists believe they could help power the world with a moonshot for energy, creating a star on Earth. The sun, 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, 4.6 billion years old. What if we could somehow bring this blazing ball of energy down to Earth to power our world? In southern France, at this construction site, a team of scientists is trying to do just that. In the center of this pit, they're hoping to pull off one of the most audacious feats of physics ever witnessed, creating a star.
We want to create a sun here on Earth.
Dr. Ned Sotoff, a plasma physicist, leads the U.S. contribution to this effort. A collaboration of 35 countries representing over half the world's population, including China and Russia. The project is called ITER, which is Latin for the way. If it's successful, it would be one of mankind's most significant achievements ever. You're going to create a temperature on Earth that is thousands of times hotter than anything on Earth, correct?
We are trying to create the hottest thing in the solar system.
You're trying to do something that people thought was unimaginable.
It's absolutely true.
Here's how ITER would work. The sun's energy comes from nuclear fusion, in which atoms fuse together. The ITER device would create fusion by heating up forms of hydrogen to temperatures 10 times hotter than the sun. Containing that hot gas would be a powerful magnetic field created by big superconducting magnets.
It's a magnetic field which is about 100,000 times stronger than the Earth's magnetic field.
And it shields the heat, as it were.
That's correct.
This sounds so dangerous. What if it explodes in some sense?
Well, first of all, this thing is very hard to keep going.
Understand, we're not talking here about nuclear fission reactions, which power today's nuclear reactors and can lead to devastating radioactive meltdowns like at Chernobyl. Controlled nuclear fusion reactions are actually very, very difficult to sustain. But ITER hopes to create the longest, most efficient, most powerful one ever, a milestone that could change the world.
We're exploiting a huge energy source. 9 centimeter distance.
Mark Henderson, another ITER physicist, notes that you can get all of the hydrogen you need to power fusion from one of the most abundant resources on Earth: ocean water. There's enough hydrogen in the ocean to power humanity with fusion for millions of years, says ITER. And fusion reactions wouldn't produce any carbon emissions.
What this thing is a future investment for your children and for your children's children.
Is this going to be inside the main building?
ITER may be a noble experiment, but success will not come easily.
Almost everything here is a challenge because of the high accuracy with very large components.
No, he's right. He's right.
Günter Januschitz has one of the hardest jobs on the project.
Okay, good.
Smoothing out technical issues between the countries as they build a very complex machine. China is making cables for the superconducting magnets. The US is winding cables and building ITER's largest magnet. India is making the enormous steel structure that will surround ITER's magnets. And that's just a sampling of the work that these countries and others are doing, according to ITER.
This is a political will because everyone wants to gain the knowledge to build a fusion reactor after ITER.
Already, the estimated cost for ITER has skyrocketed, and an internal review of the project leaked to the New Yorker said that ITER is mired in gridlock. There are some criticisms about the project, that it's not being managed well, perhaps because it is so international.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
I respond that ITER is not only an experiment in science and technology, it is an experiment in international cooperation.
ITER officials and others in the fusion field insist that the science behind ITER is sound, and if fusion energy can eventually be harnessed, it would have a profound impact on our lives.
I honestly believe that fusion will save the day, because the amount of energy that we have in the oceans is enough to live off of for all people on the Earth for many, many, many generations.
Up next, a new technology could have us flying from New York to London in just 1 hour. That's 1 mile per second. What if you could fly from New York City to London in just 1 hour? Or fly from London to Tokyo in 2 hours? Or fly anywhere in the world in just 4 hours?
Good for a hot pass. There we go. 60 seconds to launch. Here to arm and release on conditions.
May 1st, 2013.
Switch is armed.
About 50,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean.
People are really nervous. Engineers are a terrible breed. They start second-guessing themselves.
A B-52 bomber gets ready to launch this. It's not a bomb, it's an aircraft designed to fly 5 times the speed of sound. It's called the X-51A Wave Rider. For Robert Mercier and his team at the Air Force Research Laboratory, it's a do-or-die flight. The X-51 had flown 3 times before
We have a booster burnout.
with 1 partial success and 2 duds.
Wolf, it was always scheduled to go into the ocean, but not after just 30 seconds.
Good.
So everybody knows that this has to be perfect.
Booster ignition.
On their 4th try, Mercier and his team get exactly what they're hoping for. The longest flight ever with a new engine that can fly 1 mile in 1 second. Big Ben and the Big Apple would be only an hour apart at that speed.
That flight meant that we have the technology in hand to be able to design and build an engine that can fly in that extreme environment for however long we can carry fuel on it. If we had more fuel, we could have flown further.
Today's jet engines have trouble going faster than 2 or 3 times the speed of sound because their rotating parts would get too hot. But the engine that powered Wave Rider
Run mode.
had virtually no moving parts. It's called a scramjet engine. Here's how it works. Air from outside the aircraft is allowed to flow through the engine supersonically. That extremely hot air is mixed with jet fuel and lit on fire at just the right moment to create propulsion. A truly astonishing feat in aviation.
It's been likened to lighting a match inside of a blowing hurricane.
With the scramjet, you're not just flying supersonically, you're flying hypersonically. 5 times the sound barrier. The Air Force Research Laboratory is one of the government agencies leading the charge on this technology. We were given access to their facility on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio.
Metric configuration, so this is what we're going to be going to as we go into larger sizes.
Engineers here are working on the next big thing in hypersonic flight. A high-speed strike weapon that could evade any air defense system.
I really can't go into details on that because that's getting closer to being ready for application.
they're also developing a hypersonic plane, which they hope would fly twice as fast as the SR-71 Blackbird, which flew over 3 times the sound barrier. But the ultimate dream would be commercial hypersonic flight. That's not the Air Force's mission, but Mercia says it's possible, assuming that big challenges can be overcome, like dealing with the unreal heat involved.
The outside of the vehicle is seeing 2,000, 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The inside of the vehicle, where the engine is, about a toasty 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Go away.
Thanks to the lessons learned from projects like the Wave Rider, Mercia believes we could have commercial hypersonic flight as soon as 2030.
Hypersonics is one of the last great frontiers in aeronautics. With the X-51, we've opened the door and we're moving into that arena.
Coming up, ever want to be a race car driver?
I would put more salt. More salt?
Yeah. Okay. Or a gourmet chef, great golfer, or talk to a famous historical figure as if he was still alive? We'll look at some exciting moonshots in neuroscience. And later, is the United States losing its edge in science and technology?
I know Kung Fu.
What if we could download a skill into our brains as easily as Keanu Reeves did in The Matrix?
So, how do you like your women? Blonde, brunette, redhead?
Or implant a memory that we never actually experienced, like in Total Recall. Or control an avatar with our thoughts, like in the James Cameron film.
You're not used to your avatar body. This is dangerous. This is great.
Science fiction could become reality sooner than you think, if we can map the human brain.
We've learned more about the brain in the last 10 and 15 years than in all of human history combined.
Dr. Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist and CBS News science contributor, details these exciting possibilities and the current state of the brain in his latest book, The Future of the Mind.
We can actually photograph a thought, communicate these thoughts to, let's say, a robot or a computer. These were all considered to be preposterous just 10 to 15 years ago, and now we do it.
Just as the telescope revolutionized astronomy, says Kaku, the MRI and other technologies have led to a golden age in neuroscience.
We can actually see desire, self-awareness, your guilty conscience. We can actually see these as blood flows as registered by an MRI machine.
The biggest moonshot in this field might be to map all of the inner workings of the brain, down to the neuron, similar to mapping the human genome.
The next great American project, and that's what we're calling the Brain Initiative.
President Obama announced the Brain Initiative in 2013. It's an effort to show how the brain's neural circuits work together in real time.
It won't be easy, but think about what we could do once we do crack this code.
Is it more difficult to map the brain than it was to map the human genome, which took about initially 10 or 15 years?
It'll take a lot of time. Realize that the Human Genome Project only talked about maybe 20,000 genes or so that govern the human body. The brain has 100 billion neurons, each neuron connected to 10,000 other neurons. That's as many stars as there are in the Milky Way galaxy. And so it will take time.
Europe's Human Brain Project aims to simulate the brain on a supercomputer. That won't be easy, given that today's most powerful computers have just a fraction of the power necessary to do the job. But don't worry, scientists are already achieving what was once thought impossible. Giuliano Pinto is paralyzed from the chest down, but he's learned to walk again, using an exoskeleton connected to his brain. One small step for Pinto, one giant leap for neuroscience.
It was a moonshot. was our neuroscience moonshot. These are all the people around the world that collaborated in the project.
Dr. Miguel Nicolelis, head of the Walk Again project, trained 8 paraplegics in Brazil to operate hydraulic legs using only their thoughts. Patients simply think of the act of walking, and a special cap reads their brain's electrical signals, which are decoded into commands for the legs.
In less than a decade, we went from a concept to a clinically relevant application that can impact the lives of 20, 30 million people around the world.
The exoskeleton also allows the patients to feel each step they're taking. Sensors like these throughout the device send signals to the patient's arms, which stimulates them with feeling.
They had, for the first time in years, the ability to feel that they are touching the ground, that their knees are flexing, or their foot is making contact with an object, like a soccer ball.
The project culminated before the opening match of the 2014 World Cup, where Juliano Pinto made the ceremonial first kick, viewed by an audience of millions around the world.
The thing that touched me the most was when he came and looked at me and said, "I touched the ball, I felt the ball. I felt the ball when I kick it."
Where is all of this groundbreaking neuroscience leading us?
I have to trust my body to know what to do.
That's where all of the Hollywood science fiction comes in, says Kaku.
One day we'll actually connect the human mind to a robot, an avatar which may one day walk on the moon, governed by an astronaut sitting in his hot tub in his living room.
Would it be possible to take a skill and inject it into the brain? I'm thinking of The Matrix and Keanu Reeves instantly learning martial arts.
Jiu-jitsu. I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu.
This is conceivable. One day we just might have the ability to insert the vacation that we never had into our mind.
Come to Recall Incorporated, where you can buy the memory of your ideal vacation.
And beyond that, maybe even upgrading the skills of workers. Why not record many of the skills that require high tech and insert them into workers so they can upgrade their skills rather than having to go to junior colleges and struggle with courses? This may be a way to upgrade the skills of the population.
Ultimately, says Kaku, if we can upload our brains into a computer, we could outlive our frail bodies and perhaps achieve immortality.
Perhaps one day we'll have a library of souls. Instead of going to the library to read up on Winston Churchill, we'll see a hologram and have a conversation with Winston Churchill, with all the memories and all the personality quirks. One day our descendants may have a conversation with us because we live forever in a library of souls.
You really think this is possible?
Well, just realize that today, we're just at the beginning of this revolution. We're beginning now to record thoughts, and the very fact that we can talk about this in a scientific way means that we've all of a sudden crossed a watershed.
Up next, will the U.S. still be the nation that can achieve the moonshots of the 21st century?
8、7、6、5。
Or will other countries power ahead? Moonshots are exciting, inspiring, but they're also expensive. And not all of them work out like Apollo 11.
I say again, we're about 95 degrees east coming up on my sea.
So are they worth it? Should we focus the time, money, and energy on these kinds of ambitious scientific projects? The answer is yes. Think of it this way. Imagine that the Apollo moon landing had not succeeded.
That's one small step for man.
Would it still have been worth it?
One giant leap for mankind.
Almost certainly. The challenge of getting to the moon and back meant coming up with all kinds of technological innovations and solutions that have then had almost miraculous commercial applications. For example, Apollo needed small computers for its trip.
Right, hold on there, Hat, and I'll push the enter button. We see a real display now.
So NASA says it made a big purchase of a relatively new technology, the integrated circuit, the technology behind what we now know as the microchip. The companies that pioneered this product, like Fairchild Semiconductor,
invented here,
whose alumni founded Intel, partly had NASA to thank, the agency says, for the popularity of the technology that followed. The US government, by buying the initial products, helped the computer revolution take off. And it's not just the microchip.
Would you like to begin navigation?
GPS technology, which is now powering the next phase of the information revolution, was originally developed by the US military. Or consider the mapping of the human genome.
So the DNA is in there?
According to the Battelle Memorial Institute, the federal government spent $3.8 billion on this massive project from 1990 to 2003, an amount few other entities could ever have afforded.
We are here to celebrate the completion of the first survey of the entire human genome.
But in leading the way, it encouraged others. And now, a person's DNA can be sequenced for as little as $1,000. The impact on the economy of the human genome sequencing from 1988 to 2010 was estimated by Battelle at almost $800 billion, enough to support more than 310,000 jobs in 2010 alone. If you listen to all this and think the US is on the right track, alas, the problem is it is not. Federal funding for research and development has barely been keeping up with inflation in recent years, if you look at the numbers from the National Science Foundation. Since big entitlements like Social Security are mandatory spending programs, it is discretionary spending, like science, that often bears the brunt of the budget axe. And this comes at a time when others around the world are moving fast. The United States has dominated the world of basic science for years, even decades. But recently, its share of global research and development has been falling, from 37% of the total in 2001 to 30%, according to the National Science Foundation. As scientist Neil Lane points out, China is on course to surpass the United States in the percent of its GDP it spends on research and development in just a few years. It used to be that funding basic science was not a partisan issue. As Lane notes, a certain rock-ribbed Republican was a big proponent of basic research.
The remarkable thing is that although basic research does not begin with a particular practical goal, when you look at the results over the years, it ends up being one of the most practical things government does.
That was, of course, Ronald Reagan in a 1988 radio address. Americans used to understand that moonshots inspire us, but they also power America's future. Let's hope that today's politicians follow Reagan's advice and invest in science, research, and development. And let's hope that many of you, especially the young amongst you, might be inspired by the projects we described to work on the moonshots of the future. Maybe one day CNN will have a program on your moonshot. Thanks for watching this special edition of GPS. You can watch us every Sunday at 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern.